In October 2016, one of the most famous women in the world was alone in a Paris apartment. It was late. Her security detail had left for the night. Her friends had gone out, and then men dressed as police officers forced their way through the door. They bound her with zip ties. They pressed a gun to her head. They locked her in a bathroom and took millions of dollars in jewelry. In the dark, alone and terrified, she had one thought: I have babies. I have to make it home. That moment, that single sentence, tells you everything you need to know about who Kim Kardashian actually is underneath all the headlines. Not the tabloids, not the fame, not the empire, just a mother who needed to get home to her children. Today we're going to trace how a girl who watched her family get torn apart by the most infamous trial of the 20th century became a woman who turned every single piece of personal adversity into something that would outlast all of it. This is the story most people haven't told. Kim Kardashian was born on October 21, 1980 in Los Angeles, California. Her father, Robert Kardashian, was an attorney and businessman. Her mother, Kris, was a homemaker who would later become one of the most powerful managers in entertainment. Together they had 4 children: Kourtney, Kim, Khloe, and Rob. By all accounts, it was a close family, a happy one. Robert Kardashian was a man of deep convictions. He was religious. He was loyal. He believed that when a friend needed you, you showed up, no matter the cost. And that belief, that unshakable sense of loyalty, would put his family at the center of a storm that nobody was prepared for. In 1994, Kim was 13 years old. She was just a kid, doing homework, going to school, growing up in the comfortable suburbs of Los Angeles. Her biggest concerns were the things that every 13-year-old worries about. And then the world changed. In June 1994, O.J. Simpson, former NFL star, close family friend, and Kim's godfather, was accused of murdering his ex-wife Nicole Brown Simpson and her friend Ron Goldman. Robert Kardashian had been friends with O.J. since the 1970s when they first met at the University of Southern California. Theirs was a decades-long friendship, the kind that goes back so far it feels like family. When Simpson was charged, Robert Kardashian came out of retirement to rejoin the bar and join what the media called the Dream Team, the most high-profile legal defense in American history. It was an act of loyalty that would define the rest of his life, and it would place 13-year-old Kim directly in the middle of something she had no way to understand, because here is what made the Simpson trial uniquely devastating for the Kardashian family. It didn't just divide the country, it divided her parents. Kris Jenner had been close to Nicole Brown Simpson. She believed her friend had been killed. She sat on the prosecution's side of the courtroom. Robert Kardashian sat at the defense table. Kim has spoken about this moment multiple times in the years since. In an interview with David Letterman, she described what it felt like to be a child caught in the middle of a trial that the entire world was watching. She described going to her father's house and feeling like she was in one world, and going to her mother's house and feeling like she was in another. She said she and her siblings didn't know what to believe or whose side to take because they didn't want to hurt either parent. Kim has said the trial kind of tore our family apart for the whole time of the trial. She recalled her father taking her and her sister Kourtney out of school one day to sit in the courtroom without telling their mother. Kim remembered sitting right behind O.J. at the defense table while her mother sat with Nicole's parents on the other side of the room. Think about what that means for a moment. A 13-year-old girl sitting in one of the most televised courtrooms in history, watching her parents on opposite sides of a murder trial. The cameras were everywhere. The name Kardashian was being said on every news channel in America, but not in a way that anyone would want. Kim recalled that during the trial, the family went to dinner one evening and came back to find a racial slur written on the side of her father's car. This was Kim Kardashian's first introduction to the public eye. Not reality television, not social media, not a red carpet, a hostile crowd, a divided family, and a name that had become synonymous with one of the most painful legal battles the country had ever seen. O.J. Simpson was acquitted in October 1995. The verdict split the nation down the middle. For the Kardashian family, it meant different things to different people. Robert Kardashian had done what he believed loyalty required, but those who knew him best said he had private doubts. Doubts he carried quietly for the rest of his life. He and Kris had divorced before the trial began. The storm hadn't caused the split, but it had deepened everything. Kim was 14 when the verdict came in. She was in a household where loyalty and truth were sometimes pointed in different directions, where doing the right thing and doing the loyal thing weren't always the same, where the cost of standing by someone you love could be enormous, publicly, privately, and in ways that took years to fully understand. Kris Jenner would later say that going through the Simpson trial had a very strong effect on Kim's life, and that it likely helped develop a really thick skin. That thick skin would be tested far sooner than anyone expected. Robert Kardashian died of esophageal cancer in September 2003. Kim was 22 years old. She lost her father before the world knew who she was, before the shows, before the businesses, before the fame. She lost him when she was still just a young woman trying to figure out who she wanted to become. And one of the things she has said, clearly, directly, in multiple interviews, is that watching her father stand in that courtroom, watching him commit everything he had to defending someone he believed in, sparked something in her. Kim's legal ambitions came from an intense connection to her late father. The experience of the trial planted the seed of a passion that would take decades to fully grow. She would come back to that seed later. But first, she had to survive what was coming. Let's be honest about something that most people gloss over. Kim Kardashian's rise to fame in the mid-2000s was messy, it was uncomfortable, and it was built on a foundation that she had no control over. In 2007, a private tape featuring Kim was leaked without her consent. She was 26 years old. The way the media handled it was brutal. She was mocked, reduced, and dismissed as someone who had manufactured her own notoriety. The narrative was set early. Kim Kardashian was famous for being famous, and that was all she would ever be. That same year, Keeping Up with the Kardashians premiered on E! The critics dismissed it. The public watched it anyway, and slowly, very slowly, something else started to happen. People started to see something in Kim that the tabloid version of her had completely hidden. They saw a family that genuinely loved each other, a mother and daughters who fought and forgave and showed up for each other in the ways that real families do. A woman who was funny and self-aware and willing to look ridiculous on camera if it meant her family was taken care of. The show ran for 20 seasons, 20 years. It outlasted the careers of dozens of people who had dismissed it. But Kim was already thinking beyond the show. Here is the version of the story that rarely gets told. While the public was busy debating whether Kim Kardashian deserved her platform, she was quietly learning how to build something real. She watched her mother turn a family into a brand. She watched how endorsements worked, how licensing worked, how the machinery of celebrity could be converted into actual revenue. She paid attention to every part of it. In the early 2010s, she began building fragrance lines, mobile apps, endorsements that were carefully chosen rather than indiscriminate. She was not just collecting checks, she was studying the architecture of how products reach consumers. And she was paying attention to something specific. She noticed that the shapewear market, a category worth billions, had almost no one speaking to women of different body types, different skin tones, different sizes. The products that existed were designed around a narrow idea of what a woman's body should look like. She saw a gap. In 2017, she launched KKW Beauty. It quickly generated hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue. In 2020, she sold a 20% stake to Coty for $200 million, placing the brand's total valuation at $1 billion. But that was only the beginning. Before we get to SKIMS, we have to stop here, because in October 2016, everything changed. Kim was in Paris for Fashion Week. It was late at night. Her security team had gone out with her friends and her sisters. She was alone in the private residence where she was staying. Armed men dressed as police officers forced their way in. She was thrown onto a bed, tied up, and had a gun pressed to her. She was gagged and bound with zip ties. They took jewelry worth millions of dollars, a ring that had been a gift, items that couldn't be replaced. When she testified in Paris in 2025, Kim said, "I absolutely did think I was going to die. I have babies. I have to make it home. They can take everything. I just have to make it home." That sentence, think about it for a moment. Not, "I don't want to die." Not, "I'm afraid." I have babies. I have to make it home. The first thought she had was her children. In the immediate aftermath, she went quiet. She stepped back from social media almost completely. She stopped the constant stream of posts that had become her public identity. She went home. The world had a lot of opinions about what had happened. Some were sympathetic, some were not. Even in the fresh aftermath, there were public figures who essentially suggested she had brought it on herself by displaying her wealth. She didn't respond. She went to therapy. She grieved privately. And according to her therapist, something that had already been true about Kim became even more hardwired after Paris. She had an extraordinary capacity to remain calm in the face of overwhelming fear. Her therapist told her, "You think calm is your superpower. I think you are so desensitized from trauma that you literally are frozen in fight or flight." It wasn't peace, it was armor. And behind that armor, she was deciding what kind of woman she wanted to be on the other side of this. This is the part of the story that gets lost in the business headlines. Kim has 4 children: North, Saint, Chicago, and Psalm. She had North in 2013, Saint in 2015, Chicago in 2018, and Psalm in 2019. The last 2 were born via surrogate after Kim's doctors determined that another pregnancy carried serious health risks. Everything she has built since 2016, every business decision, every pivot, every partnership, has been filtered through one question: what am I leaving for them? She has said this in different ways across different interviews. She talks about her children constantly, not in the performative way of a celebrity brand, but in the specific way that parents talk about their kids, the fights and the worries, and the funny moments, and the things that keep you up at night. After Paris, she became intensely private about their whereabouts and their safety. She stopped posting their locations in real time. She changed her security protocols entirely. She had learned, the hardest way possible, that visibility has a cost, and she was not willing to let her children pay it. In 2019, Kim launched SKIMS. The idea was simple in concept and extraordinarily difficult in execution. Shapewear designed to work across all skin tones, all body types, all sizes. Products that actually reflected what real women's bodies looked like, rather than a narrow industry standard. She co-founded it with Jens Grede, a Swedish entrepreneur with deep experience in fashion and retail. The launch did not go smoothly. The initial name she chose was criticized for cultural insensitivity, and she changed it before the product went on sale. It was a stumble. She acknowledged it and moved on. The product sold out within hours. SKIMS raised capital at a valuation of $1.6 billion in 2021. $3.2 billion in 2022, and $4 billion in 2023, with revenues of $750 million in 2023, and reports suggesting the brand surpassed $1 billion in revenue in 2024. SKIMS has become one of the most valuable private fashion companies in the world. In 2025, SKIMS announced a partnership with Nike, one of the most significant brand collaborations in modern retail history. This is not a celebrity lending her name to a product. This is a woman who identified a gap in a billion-dollar market, built a product to fill it, found the right operational partner, raised institutional capital from serious investors, and scaled it into a global business. The people who said she was famous for being famous were still saying it when SKIMS crossed a $4 billion valuation. Here is the thread that runs through all of it. A 13-year-old girl sitting behind her father in a courtroom, watching him read a statement on behalf of his best friend, watching her mother sit on the other side, watching the country argue about justice and loyalty and truth in real time. That girl never forgot what she saw. In 2019, the same year she launched SKIMS, Kim began studying law through a non-traditional apprenticeship program in California, which allows people to study under practicing attorneys instead of attending law school. In 2021, she passed the baby bar, California's first-year law examination. It was a significant step in her journey toward becoming a lawyer. She had already been working on criminal justice reform before that. In 2018, she went to the White House to advocate for the release of Alice Marie Johnson, a woman who had served over 20 years in prison for a nonviolent drug offense. Johnson was granted clemency. She kept going. She worked case by case, not for cameras, not for headlines, but because she had decided this was what she wanted her platform to actually mean. In May 2025, Kim obtained her law degree. The same week, she flew to Paris to testify in person at the trial of the men who had robbed her 9 years earlier. She stood in a historic courtroom, looked at the people who had held a gun to her head and told her she was going to die, and she testified. She said she thought she was going to die. She said she begged for her life. She said it was the most terrifying experience she had ever been through. And then she said this: "While I'll never forget what happened, I believe in the power of growth and accountability and pray for healing for all." That is not a press release. That is not a brand statement. That is a woman who has been through enough to know that holding on to rage is heavier than letting it go, and choosing to let it go anyway. Let's take stock for a moment. A daughter who watched her family fracture under the weight of the most famous trial in American history and decided to become a lawyer herself. A young woman who had her privacy violated in one of the most public and humiliating ways imaginable and didn't disappear. A mother who was held at gunpoint in a foreign city, certain she was going to die, and whose first thought was her children, and came home and built something for those children that will outlast anything any tabloid ever wrote about her. As of 2025, Kim Kardashian's net worth is estimated at $2 billion. SKIMS alone is valued at $4 billion, making Kim and her co-founder each worth over $1 billion from that single company. But the number isn't the story. The story is the distance between that 13-year-old girl sitting in a courtroom watching her family split down the middle and the woman who walked into a Paris courtroom in 2025 to face the men who tried to break her. The story is everything that happened between those two moments. The years of being dismissed, the years of being reduced to a punchline, the years of doing the work quietly, without credit, while the world decided what kind of person she was allowed to be. The story is that she kept going anyway. There's a version of Kim Kardashian's story that a lot of people tell, the leaked tape, the reality show, the famous for being famous. That version is easy. It fits in a headline. It doesn't require you to think about the 13-year-old girl sitting in that courtroom, or the 22-year-old who lost her father before anyone knew her name, or the 35-year-old lying in a Paris apartment in the dark thinking about her babies. The version I'm more interested in is the one where adversity doesn't just build character, it builds direction. She didn't become a lawyer despite losing her father to that trial. She became a lawyer because of it. She didn't build SKIMS despite being publicly humiliated and dismissed for years. She built it because she had spent those years watching, learning, and waiting for the right moment. She didn't walk into that Paris courtroom in 2025 despite almost being killed in that apartment in 2016. She walked in because of it, because she had decided that the only acceptable response to something trying to destroy you is to come back stronger and face it directly. Most people have one thing that tries to break them. Kim Kardashian has had about 15, and she is still here, still building, still getting up and going again. That is the heartbeat within the headline. That is the story. Thanks for watching.